Wittenberg once said, "Nothing can happen if not first to dream." NC State has been blessed with many dreamers. In the 40s, Everett Case came here from the Midwest. He dreamed of building a national power. He dreamed of building an arena to house that power. He dreamt it, and he did it. 1974, the names: David Thompson, the Player of the Year; Stoddard, Monty Tao. These players dreamed of bringing it all home, and they did. They won the Atlantic Coast Conference Championship. They won our first national championship. 1983, the names changed. The result was the same. Lowe, Wittenberg, Bailey, and the dunk by Lorenzo Charles brought home another Atlantic Coast Conference Championship and the second national championship. I'm a dreamer. I have big dreams. I dream of winning our third national champion, adding a banner for another ACC championship. I dream of someday having an arena which is the largest and the best in the entire country. You know something? Dreams come true at NC State. Dreams become reality at NC State. Are you a dreamer? Do you have dreams that you can make come true? Can you accept that challenge? I think you can. Remember, a wise man once said, "Nothing can happen if not first a dream."
You are listening to Judica County, a podcast that focuses on North Carolina law and how that law affects the average North Carolinian on a day-to-day basis. I am your host, Josh Whitaker. Welcome to Judica County. My name is Josh Whitaker. I'm your host. Today, my co-host is Jim Wilson. We're very fortunate today to have two great NC State legends with us to discuss the late, great Coach Jim Valvano. First, we have Mr. Ernie Myers with us. Mr. Myers was a McDonald's All-American out of New York. Was on the great 1983 national team. Mr. Myers, we're very happy to have you with us today. Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Also, we've got Mr. Chris Corchiani with us. He was a McDonald's All-American recruited by Coach Valvano out of Florida in 1987. Obviously had a great NC State career, and we're very happy that he could be with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Josh.
Absolutely. What I thought we'd talk about today is Jimmy Valvano, and not the Jimmy Valvano that I think the nation kind of knows. His fame now, everybody sees the clips of the 83 national championship team. I think they kind of relate him to NC State, but I think the national media, because of his battle and because of how open he was with his battle and because of how charismatic he was, I think the national folks don't really tie him back to NC State very often. And so one of the things I want to do, since I get a chance to talk to Chris from time to time, and Ernie was so gracious to be here today too, was to talk about Jimmy V as a coach and kind of tie him to State and talk about him as a recruiter, as an in-game coach, and kind of how you guys stayed in touch with him after your collegiate careers ended, and just kind of what kind of man he was as a collegiate basketball coach, because that's how I know him. That's how Jimmy here knows him. I tried to read everything I can read on Jimmy Valvano, all the books Tim Peeler writes, the local historians, and you just don't get a good glimpse of that. And so I thought you guys could do a good job giving us a little insight on that. Recruiting I know was a lot different back when you guys were coming up versus what your son probably saw, Chris. As a recruiter, I know, Chris, you were out of Florida, 87, 88, and Ernie, you were out of the Bronx. Was that right?
Yeah, my high school was in the Bronx, but I'm actually from Harlem.
Okay.
I used to take the train up to the Bronx all the time, and my high school coach played under Jimmy V's dad, Rocco Valvano.
All right.
At my high school. So he used to see Jimmy V running around, a little snotty-nosed kid, in the gym in the Bronx.
You're right in the heart of Big East country when the Big East was really, really strong.
It was just starting to get that way. I wanted to leave. I didn't want to stay in New York. I didn't, St. John's recruited me, and, Louis Conaseca, and, Chris Mullins was a good friend of mine, and I didn't want to go and sit behind him.
Right.
Playing in New York, and I decided I wanted to go somewhere else. So when that bug got out, Jimmy V, he was a performer. I mean, he, you go to camps and V, he had this skit with the rat and, so he was just a fun guy just to, be around. He was recruiting a player by the name of Mike Moses on my high school team for Iona. He had Gary Springer, he had Jeff Rulin, all these guys. He came to a high school game when I was a sophomore. And, we played our rivals, which was Rice High School. And I had a good game as a sophomore, and he said, he followed me in the locker room, and he said, "Man, in 2 years I'll come back. I'm gonna come back and get you." I said, "Yeah, whatever, man." And he was laughing. Ernie, I'm gonna be back in 2 years. Watch. I said, okay, well, we'll see. Because at that time, you're a sophomore in high school. You're like, man, I lucked up and had a good game. He's not coming back, But in 2 years, man, I was a McDonald's All-American. And the first guy knocking on the door was Jimmy V. Yeah. Remember 2 years ago I told you? I'm at NC State now. I'm like, oh, okay. He put on the performance, fell out, had me rolling, laughing, comfortable. Him and Ray Martin, they were like a tag team, man. It was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was blown away.
So your family really took to him too?
Man. He came to my house. I lived in the hood, so the fellas that was on the stoop, man, they thought it was detectives. It was Ray. So when they saw me running up, he said, yo, E, man, why everybody ran when they saw me? I was like, I said, man, they might have thought you was DT or something, man. I don't know. So my mom cooked a nice Italian meal for him. Yeah. She had the lasagna ready, and that's when I signed. It was just a fun recruiting process for me when I came down to visit. It was just the guys and everything, and V was just that guy, man. He was from New York, from Queens. He had the lingo, and he was funny, and I was like, man, who wouldn't want to play for this guy?
That's awesome to hear, man. That's well, Chris, for you, so you were in Florida, so you were way down on the other side of the coast there. How did you first get introduced to him?
The reason I came to NC State, was because of the 1983 national championship run. So, thanks to Ernie for kind of being a part of that team, because in Miami at the time, you only got a game or two a week. And the NCAA tournament was obviously special. And that run that they made, I think the whole country got behind NC State. Right. And I was just enthralled by the way that the team just, would come back and you thought they were going to lose. And then the way Coach V presented himself all the way through the tournament. So that was like a lot of exposure to NC State, just seeing them. And at that time I was young, Ernie's 15, 20 years older than me, but so I was just a young kid at the time. Then I started playing in different camps, and back then you would go to 5-star, you'd go to a camp called BC. AAU wasn't a real big deal. It was just starting to get going. And I remember getting my first letter from NC State. Letters meant a lot more back then than they do now, because there's different ways to recruit a kid. But I got a letter, and if you got one that was typed, you knew it was a form letter. You just kind of put that in the other side. But when you got one handwritten, and I got one handwritten from Coach V, and he said, I saw you at camp, really interested, want to come down. And you'd get a number of those letters every day. But when I got that one letter from him, right away I said, gosh, this guy's special. That team just won a national championship. Then when I started getting recruited, what really was interesting to me is that the schools that were recruiting me, the coaches would come in, and Coach K at Duke, he'd come in and he'd be all dressed up and very formal and did a wonderful job. Terry Holland at Virginia, right, again, would come in formal, and it was just a nice presentation. But when Coach Valvano came in with Dick Stewart, they came in sweatsuits. They didn't even want to recruit me. They wanted to recruit my mom and dad. And they knew we were a close-knit family. Right. And they were like, we're not even going to talk to you. We're going to drink wine and eat spaghetti and meatballs that my mom prepared. And I was like, I'm the guy. It's about, at some point, we ended up going outside and playing 2-on-2 taps. The thing about Coach V is whatever he did, he wanted to win. He was the most competitive person that I've ever been around, whether it was throwing darts or playing horseshoes, playing pool. He was so talented and competitive at the same time. He never lost. And if he did lose, he changed the rules so that he did win. He was one of the things that really stands out was he came in my living room. And as we got a little further down the recruitment, one of the big questions always is, am I going to play? Who's in front of me? What's it look like? And he said, listen, you're going to play not because you're good. You're going to play because you're Italian. He said, I can make those rules up. And he went in there, and I wanted to know what kind of offense he ran and all the typical questions that players want to know. And in my living room, he grabbed a lamp, and he said, look, this is going to be Avi Lester. He's going to set a high ball screen for you. And he was grabbed my sofa, and he said, there's going to be a double screen over here for a shooter, and you're going to have an option. He grabbed my TV, and by the end of about 5 minutes, all my furniture in my living room was all rearranged. And he just put on a big show. But he was different than anyone else that recruited me. He was fun to be around. He had a personality there was no one like him. He'd walk into a room and he would capture everyone's attention. And I've seen guys try that, but they can't emulate the way he did it. But very special recruiter, even a much special person.
Sure.
Everybody thinks of him as a great coach, and he was. And we can get into some of the things he did as a coach, but he was such a brilliant mind. And that's the thing. If you ask me what's the one thing that kind of stands out, and it was not, everyone would say he was a motivator and charismatic. Well, we all know that. But to me, the thing that a lot of people don't realize is just how smart an individual he was. Not only in basketball, he knew about politics, he knew about Shakespeare, he knew about the Civil War. I mean, this guy, he was a brilliant mind. Yeah. And it was a shame that he passed away way too young. Absolutely. Because I think he still could have accomplished a lot of things outside of the basketball world.
Yeah.
I mean, he was always reading. He had War and Peace, on plane. He was always reading. Every time I saw him, when he had a break or we were on a plane flight, he's a real sharp guy.
You always read he didn't sleep or he slept very little.
One of the things he would do is during the season, if he was reading a magazine or saw, he would rip it out and he would put it in a shoebox. And he would take 1 week vacation and go down to the coast during the summer, and he would read on one particular subject and become an expert. I mean, he was not someone that just dabbled at Shakespeare. I mean, he would recite it. He knew everything about it. So he, as Ernie mentioned, he was well-versed and well-read on many different subjects.
He came down and recruited you when you got to NC State. So your freshman year, we'll talk about that in a minute because that was amazing. What about your freshman year? So we've already got the 83 national title and you already knew about State and we're on the map. When you got there, what were some of your first interactions with him as a coach?
It's funny, when you're being recruited, you're loved and you're told how great you are. And this goes on all the time. Once you get on campus, they love you. They just don't show it as much as they did when they were recruiting you. So,
absolutely.
My first real encounter was about a week in at NC State. We started school, and Rodney Monroe and I got in a big fight over at Carmichael. And it was one of those fights where you argue and you throw a couple punches and somebody jumps in and breaks it up. Well, it wasn't like that. We argued, threw a couple punches, and actually fought for a while. And I kept looking around going, who's going to jump in here? And we ended up going 3 rounds.
Wow.
We in that night after study hall, Coach V called Rodney and I in the office and just for about an hour laid into us and just said, listen, you guys are my backcourt of the future, and I've got you guys beating the hell out of one another. He said, what's going on? And I saw a different side of him that was total respect and what he wanted to do as far as a team. And, again, there's so many different things, but that was my first real interaction with him because obviously basketball didn't start until October. Coach V could have fun. I already tell you, he'd have as much fun as anyone, but when it got down to business, he could get on your tail just as hard as anyone as well.
When you got to NC State, Ernie, what was your first?
I came in and I went down to Case, and so I walked in his office, and he was at his desk. He had this huge desk in his office, and I knocked on the door and I said, "Hey, Coach." He looked up. "Hey, Ernie. Yeah, I got some things I got to take care of. I'll see you later, all right?" And I'm like, this ain't the same guy that was beating down the door. And, love you, Ernie. And I was like, what is this? This is, he got me now. All right, that's what it is.
He's all done.
He's got me, you know what I mean? So I was like, oh, okay, that's how it is. All right. I'm going to have to show him on the court. So that's how I took it, what I mean? But he was like a father figure for me because I didn't really, have that type of, interaction with my dad. So when I got here, it was just like, he was the guy, man. I mean, he treated me great. You know what I mean? He treated me like a man, because we didn't have curfew. We didn't have none of that stuff. We didn't have bed checks.
Yeah.
None of that stuff. We didn't have none of that. But if you didn't show up to play, somebody else was going to play. That was his thing. I'll treat you like men, okay? If you show me that you can't handle it, there's some other guy sitting right here that's going to take your spot. That's just the way it was. So you had to be ready. You had to have that mentality like, hey, you had to show him that you wanted to do this. Because once you showed Coach V that you can do something, he let you do it. Once you showed him, you can score. Okay, I'm going to let you score then. And when I came into the conference, they had the 30-second clock and the 3-point shot. Experimental, and talking about doing that now, 30 seconds. That was like 30-something years ago. They had one in the ACC. Even though he showed me the little shade, and I guess he was trying to show me like, hey, it ain't gonna be like it was before. I ain't gonna be kissing your ass no more. Yeah, I got you.
Along those lines is when you have such a tremendous respect for a coach, you're willing to do anything. And I think that teams that Coach V had, they loved him, they respected him, trusted him. We'd be in that locker room before the game, and you really felt like it was special, and it was the team against the world. And my junior year, we were going through some tough times with the NCAA, which was ridiculous because they found 2 violations. And what Coach V would say, those moments in the locker room, he'd say, listen, it's us against the world. He said, you walk outside these walls and people are going to ridicule you, your teammates, but this is all we have. You guys are a great group of young men, and we need to stick together, and we need to go up there tonight and put on a show, and you'd want to run through the door. I mean, you'd be so fired up, you'd do anything, and that's why I think Coach V's teams always played so hard. I think that was one of the characteristics of all his teams. As Ernie mentioned, also he let you play, but he knew that everybody was going to play hard, and it was just fun playing for him.
V used to tell you, hey, if you're not sitting on that bench cheering, you're never going to play. Yeah. He said, I'm not going to put you on the court. You mad at me? He said, you'll sit there and rock. So, you know what I mean? So
you hear about how different college coaches prepare and how they practice with their players and how hard some coaches will practice. But what was a Jimmy Valvano practice?
Preparation was good, but we got better as the year went on. We competed. The teams that we had, we were 10, 12 deep, and we had talented players. Our practices were wars. There was no taking it easy. When I was a freshman, I came in, and Quentin Jackson was a senior that had just won the ACC tournament the previous year. Kelsey Weems was a heck of a guard. So just at that one position, practices were wars. There wasn't a ton of preparation, going over the other team's plays, relentless. I mean, we knew exactly what the other teams were going to do.
Right.
He was more concerned about us playing hard and worried more about us. You hear certain coaches say, I'm not worried about what they do. We're going to play our game. And I think Coach V would fit into, we're going to do it our way, and they're going to have to make adjustments to us.
Yeah.
And but the practices were very, very tough. If I had to say his strengths and weaknesses, his preparation to me was good, not great, but his in-game coaching to me, there wasn't anyone any better.
That was one of the questions I was going to have about coaches. You were talking about him being in your living room, moving the furniture around and diagramming plays for you there. And then, Ernie, you were part of the 30 for 30, which is just a tremendous production that I've seen, my family loves. I've introduced my in-laws from Cleveland, Ohio, to, and I think has turned a lot of people onto that 83 team again. But one of the best parts of that to me was where they were talking about the strategy to start fouling people, to put them on the free throw line, and that kind of kicked off that whole thing that I remember from basketball growing up. The last few minutes of a contest should drive you crazy watching the game drag out. But for the state team in 83, that was a lifesaver. Talk a little bit more about those strategies and what that meant to you as a player, the confidence it gave you and your coach to know that, if the plan wasn't working, you can go back and just recreate something in a game.
Coach McClain was meticulous, along with Coach V, and knowing what the other team did. We, the practice team or whatever, we knew every play that they were going to run. We knew the setup, the whole 9 yards, and Coach V, even in the games, we know he used to do a triangle in 2 or a box in 1 or 1-3 in a chaser, have you chasing a guy around, or box in 1, that type of defense. But we were well prepared for teams when they came in. It's coming. This is they setting you up. I remember my freshman year, I started against North Carolina, and all week we went over what they were going to run, and they had this play where Jordan kind of fakes up and he goes up for the alley-oop, and I was like, that's not going to happen to me. I'm ready. He's not going to get that dunk. That play, it was a backdoor play where Jordan kind of walks out, then he kind of juice up, and they throw him a lob. So the first play of the game, V told everybody, all the coaches, said, watch what happens. Ernie's going to get caught on this play. Exactly. First play of the game, here's Jordan. I foul him. He don't get the dunk, but I foul him, while he's going up. And I look at Coach, and he looks at me, he smiles, and he shakes his hand, and I'm shaking my head like, damn, I knew it was going to happen. You know what I mean?
That same play that Carolina used to run, And we would go over pregame when we were getting ready to play Carolina. It probably has a lot to do with you getting burnt on that play. But Coach V would say, listen, they've been doing this for years. It's a staple of their secondary offense. When they go and the guy goes backdoor, they go at them. And he said, listen, I want to make this clear. If you're guarding the person that scores on that play, just come sit next to me. You don't have to wait for somebody to come in. You just bring your ass over and sit right next to me. But that was funny as Ernie mentions that because he certainly would go over that play. Yeah, but he was an innovator when you were talking about, with your question, with fouling. If you're watching NBA now, that's all they're doing, throughout the game. But he was a little smarter than people. Back then, people didn't foul. Back then, a lot of people didn't play junk defenses. It was the thing that bothers me the most about college athletics when I watch a game now. There's usually not 5 guys on the court that can beat you. And Coach V's mentality was never let the best player on the other team beat you. And he would play, as Ernie mentioned, a box and one, a 1-3 and a chaser, and he'd be innovative. Teams didn't do that back then. A lot of times you got 2 or 3 guys on the team, they're capable of getting 20. You've got a couple guys on the floor that aren't capable, don't even want to. They don't want to shoot an open shot. That's one thing Coach V exploited, and it was very, very successful over the years.
Certain coaches that come up and say, V, do this and do that, all the assistants, and you look at them, I'm doing this. I'm doing what I want to do. And the coaches will look at them, and we just add in our advice, But coaches should just go ahead and do it, man. He took the heat if it didn't work, but when it did, he got the accolades, man. But he was more right than he was wrong.
Yeah, he was a big believer of changing defenses, all the time. And if you really think of it as a point guard, if you're playing man-to-man every possession, I'm in a rhythm. I know what to do. Being a point guard on the opposition team, was this a box and one? Sometimes it'd be a little half-court trap. Every possession, certain games was different. He didn't play man-to-man 40 minutes. He didn't play zone 40 minutes. He was always mixing it up, and you could never really get in a rhythm. And then if someone did, get hot, he'd box and one. Don't let him touch it. Take him out of the game.
And what offense are you going to run now? Like he said, if you're a point guard, and imagine being the coach, like, hey, what do we... They're playing a box and one now. What are we going to do? Run, okay, now he's doing a 1-3 in a chase or a 2-3 zone. It was just crazy, man.
I was also curious, too. I came of age in Syndex area, chopping wood, take every game individually, take every game as the same, And so looking back, I was going to ask you guys, how did Coach Valvano approach rivalry games? Did he approach those differently than just normal games? Or what was his attitude when those state Duke games rolled around?
I remember he told me when we first played North Carolina that, Ernie, they're going to shut the whole state down. Everybody closed the stores. You had to be ready to play. He loved those rivalry games. You cut your cloth in those games. He saw what you was about in those games. And then the smaller teams, if you say, hey, we pay these guys to come in, kick their asses. But the big games and the rivalry games and those North Carolina games, back when I was playing, Duke wasn't even on the map. Right. Really, they had a good recruiting class. With my first year, they were freshmen. They came in the league with me, so they were thinking about firing Krzyzewski.
Right.
You know what I mean? And and Krzyzewski says that if we hadn't won the national championship, he probably would have got fired because all the attention was on us. So all the media was on the 83 team.
It was not just another game. Carolina and Duke, those 2 games were scheduled in his office. He loved the spotlight. He loved the moment. The bigger, the better. Those were the games that he knew if he won, he would propel the program. And as Ernie said, he'd always say, listen, they're shutting down. Nobody's going to be on the streets. It's a big game.
It's a big deal.
Say, if you're not jacked up, juiced up, ready to go, then damn it, something's wrong with you. He loved the bright lights. That's what he lived for. The players would really feed off of him. And, so he understood the rivalry. If we won, he'd really be excited. If we lost, he took it hard. So it was certainly not just another game. We've got another game next week against Maryland. Now was not that. I think that he appreciated the rivalry, respected the rivalry, but it was special. Those 4 games were much more important than the rest of the games.
He didn't run away from anybody. Back then, SMU was big with John Sunvold and Missouri and CONCAC and all these. We played everybody. We played the big games. You see Kentucky coming to Reynolds and Louisville and Notre Dame, and we played against all those big college programs. I'm not talking about just the conference and the rivalry.
Right.
We had some big games in Reynolds Coliseum. He knew how to get his teams ready.
Playing big names. That's one of the things we've heard that State's trying to do under Coach Gottfried now is schedule a little bit tougher competition. It's benefited State the last couple of years when it comes down to the bubble. The Pac's got a pretty good resume to get in, but as a player, how does that prepare you when you get to like tournament time? And maybe you've had some ups and downs. Maybe the team's finished close to 500, but now you're in the second round and you're playing these teams again.
What Mark has done is very smart because you need to play those. It used to be you play a bunch of cupcakes, you get your 20 wins, you get in. It doesn't work that way anymore. I don't know if Mark loves playing them or he's figured out that's what he needs to do. The difference is Coach V didn't need to play those teams because back then it was how many wins do you have at the end of the year. V loved it. He loved the challenge. I think Mark has done a remarkable job of figuring out in advance. You don't make the schedule like now for next year. You make it in advance. And he knew, like, for example, this year, Boise State, they were going to have a good team. We want to play a good team. It's only going to help our RPI. It's going to help us come tournament time. So he's done a lot of scientific studies on how you get to the tournament. And on the other hand, you look at someone like Seth Greenberg when he was at Virginia Tech. They had some good teams, but they didn't play a lot of people.
They got left
out
a lot.
So it negatively affected them. The difference would be Coach Gottfried has realized the benefits of playing those teams where Coach V was, I want to play him because the lights are on and Al McGuire's here and it's national TV. I don't want to play Morgan State and A&T. I want to play the big dogs.
I want to play those big teams, man. And that's how I recruited. He was like, man, we're going to play North Carolina. We're going to play Memphis State. We're going to play Notre Dame. And you're like, you see all these teams on television. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's why you want to play those guys. He didn't run from anybody.
In recruiting, that's as important as anything to a kid in high school. When you go there and you say, here's who we're playing in conference. We got Duke, Carolina, Maryland, but at a conference, we're playing Kansas, and they're going to have Danny Manning, and we're playing Louisville, and they're going to have Purvis, and we're playing up and down the line. UNLV we played with Larry Johnson. He didn't shy away, but as a kid, that's what you want.
Yeah.
You look at that schedule and you'd always look at how many games were on national TV. And because of V and because of what the 83 team did, they all were on national TV. They wanted that.
Yeah, the guys were household names. People knew of you. Because they watched you play so much on national TV. Not just locally here.
Yeah.
You knew whenever you played on national TV, wherever you were from, everybody that knew you or knew of you, you better not be sitting on the bench. Because you was going, you're going to hear about it this summertime. Yeah, we saw you, but you weren't playing, so you were ready to play.
It's funny you mentioned that UNLV game because right before I was just reading something right before we came over, but it was a write-up. It was Tim Peeler's write-up of that UNLV game. What was Coach Valvano's approach to that game?
Him and the Shark,
Tarkanian,
they were tight. They were real tight. That was a game that meant a lot because again, they were kind of the West Coast team with all the glitz, and back then, he was kind of the Nike spokesperson for out West, and Coach V was the big Nike guy. And that was back when a lot of coaches didn't have those type of deals. And again, he was one of the first guys, you talk about him being an innovator. He was one of the first coaches to be sponsored by Nike and with lucrative. He was, one of the first coaches to go on talk shows and the first coach to really be a motivational speaker. So a game like that meant
Cosby Show, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he's doing David Letterman, man.
So playing in a game like that meant a lot to Coach V to win, but it was exposure not only for the players, but for him as well. He had a business mind about him that back then, Unitards, that was just a publicity stunt that didn't work well. Right. But that was not one of my final moments. But it was a publicity stunt that people talked about. Coach V, again, kids like that. Even with football nowadays, they like all the 20 different uniforms that Oregon has and all that. That was the thing that attracted a lot of people to him, was just how innovative he was both on the court and off the court. As a speaker, he was tremendous. Some practices he'd be there, but he'd be in a suit. And we knew when he was in a suit and tie, he just came from a speaking engagement. And we knew those practices were usually going to be a little easier, which was
Let me ask you this. What's your favorite Coach Valvano memory If you had to narrow it down to just one, then what would that be?
I think one of the moments that kind of was special with me is we were going through a hard time with the NCAA tournament, and he was always, giving me a hard time. He's, who are you dating? You look a little slow out there. What's going on? He was always giving me a hard time, and so I brought my girlfriend to the office, and I was up there. Actually, I was studying. And he was in the office, and I said, Coach, I want to introduce you to my new girlfriend. He said, girlfriend? That's an NCAA violation. You can't. And he grabbed the book and said, hey, look right here. That's a violation. You can't have a girlfriend. What are you, crazy? And see, he loved the moment. He would take that, and it was a 15-minute thing. And it was hilarious. And he just keep going on. Look at this. Call the NCAA. There's no way. This is this is a death. But to me, that was a personal moment that I'll always remember. But there's just so many great stories about him. He was, I tell you, I'll be honest with you, Josh. I get chills hearing Ernie talk and bring up memories, because even though Ernie and I didn't play on the same team, we're only a few years apart. So those stories, the same things he's saying, are the things that are in my head. And I get excited talking about the man because, as Ernie said, he was a father figure, and you would do anything for him, and you total respect. And Ernie mentioned something about when you lost, he wore everything on his sleeve. You knew. You could look at him and say, "Oop, Pack won yesterday." He was so passionate about everything he did. To me, I haven't run across anyone quite like Coach Valvano.
Yeah.
Being a motivator, a competitor, a father figure, someone that cares. He was one of a kind. He really was.
He was sort of like a Renaissance man. My favorite Coach V moment was when we were about to play Houston, and all week, and everybody was saying, hey, they're going to kill you guys. They're going to, V was play the media up. We're not going to shoot the ball until 3 weeks. We're going to hold it forever. And he just busted into the locker room and was like, you think we're going to hold the ball? And I was just talking shit to those guys. You know what I mean? We're going to go out here, we're going to play, and we're going to shove it down their throats. All this stuff he was saying, he was a totally different guy. So we were sitting there like, yeah, like right, yeah, he's right. We can play, we can beat those. And that's how it happened. That was one of my favorite Coach V moments, because he was just out of his mind.
I think that's why State fans have such a hard time, because I was just a kid, but you could see the passion that he had for the game, and you could tell that he cared. Even us, people who didn't talk to him or know what he was doing. And then, as nice of a guy as Les Robinson was, and as nice of a guy as Herb Sendek was, to go from that kind of passion, that level of passion to what we ended up getting, it was tough.
That was a hard act to follow. V was a hard act to follow.
And Chris, I was going to check this before we sat down, and I forgot. But did you play a year under Les, or did you?
Yeah, I played 3 years under Coach V. And then we had the NCAA, and where NC State kind of shot before listening to all the facts. And then Coach Robinson came in for my senior year. And Coach Robinson was a perfect coach to have for your senior year. He came in and was a good person to make the transition. And spoke with Rodney and I prior to the season and said, listen, I want to make this special. You guys have gone through a tough time. And so I've got nothing but great respect for Coach Robinson and making my senior year a special one.
When all the stuff that came up that led to Coach Valvano's exit, State fans, we look back on that time and are not fans of it, especially with all the other things that are going on in the area now at other area schools. How did he handle it?
Coach V thought he was going to survive. I thought that, all along there was a lot of outside forces, the News and Observer, then they came out with the book, the NCAA came in. He thought that he was going to have the support of the administration. I think up until the end, he really thought that, he was going to be the guy, he was going to stay there, especially when the things that were found. There was an NCAA investigator, Dave Didion, wrote a letter to Coach V. And it said if he had a son, he'd want him to play for Coach V, that this program is a clean program. They found two things, but the administration got swayed by public opinion in the News and Observer, and they felt that they had to make a move. In recent years, other universities have gotten all kind of information and have not pulled the trigger, and they've supported their coaches.
Yeah.
And to me, I love NC State. I was hurt by that. I think a lot of people were, that the guy that won a national championship, that meant a lot, not only to the athletic department, but for the university. When they won a national championship in '83, tuition went through the roof.
Yeah, I bet.
So think of the broad scope outside of athletics, what he did for the university. And when they could have supported him and said, listen, let us get all the facts. Let us kind of look at what's going on. They didn't do that. He was guilty before all the information was out there. So I was really upset about that. I actually asked for my release, and I opened up going into my senior year.
I didn't know that.
I was looking to transfer. I was going to go to Connecticut, Florida, and Coach V found out about it. He took me to Pizza Hut right there on Western Boulevard. And we sat down there, and I didn't know what it was about. He said, listen, you're not going anywhere. You need to stop. Quit trying to be a big shot. This is your school. You've had a great career. I'm going to be fine. I know you're disappointed, but don't do it because of me.
Yeah.
I was just so disappointed, again, in a school that I love. I have a sour taste in my mouth the way a few individuals handled that situation.
Yeah.
See, a lot of people didn't like V. I mean, they loved the fact that we won a national championship. They couldn't take who he was. V was just a different type of guy. I think that played into all of that stuff that, the administration and, a lot of the faculty, they didn't like him. And I think that had a lot to do with Coach V getting sick, because he just felt everything internally.
One thing, because you mentioned the book, and it was the manager, John Simons. Mm-hmm. He has a chapter, which is only 2.5 pages on me, which I didn't even know the guy because he was the manager the previous year. Now, he was still in grad school. I didn't. He said that we had these conversations. The other thing, you've got two players. You had Walker Lambiot and Andy Kennedy. One guy started most of the year, and Walker Lambiot didn't play well, and his minutes decreased at the end of the year. The other guy was Andy Kennedy that couldn't get on the court and ends up transferring. So you've got two guys that are disgruntled over playing time that left. And there are two that helped John Simons with this book.
They helped him unbeknownst to themselves. They would sit around and talk about it, and he would be there. When you're a young player and you're not playing, they didn't know he was writing a book. He overheard them.
Today, it wouldn't hold up.
No, it wouldn't even hold up to any
been
type
a huge lawsuit for saying those type of things. And a source close to the program mentioned that, they were doing this and that. And if you really looked at that book, 80% of the things in the books, there weren't even violations. They were things that probably weren't good that college athletes were doing, but they weren't violations.
They were just throwing bobs at Coach V.
Yeah, I laughed. There was a great story about Mike Giome going into a hotel, and he would go into the minibar, and he would pop the beer from the bottom and suck the beer out and put it back in. Now, whether or not that happened or not, I don't know. But A, it's not a violation.
No, not at all.
And B, it's pretty neat, to be able to think out of the box like that. But you've got the News and Observer and the NCAA. All of that was mounting. It was kind of like a tsunami wave that was coming in. But that's where the administration had to have a backbone and say, hold on a second, what do we really have here?
Yeah.
Not, we've got to get rid of him because of all the pressure. That doesn't happen all over, especially for a guy that's been great for the university. Take a stand and say, you know what, we're going to uncover all this information. Everything there, let's put it all on the table. And if it warrants for firing a head coach, so be it. Don't fire him before you find out everything. Again, 2 violations, selling sneakers and selling ACC tickets. Again, in today's day and age, when the NCAA comes in and they do a thorough investigation, and there's 2 things found.
You're doing all right.
You're doing great, man.
Exactly.
And that's why Dave Didion, who was the lead investigator for them, said, listen, if I had a son, I'd want him playing for you. This is the program that I would want my son to be at.
I like how we as State fans, we don't call that book by its name. It's just the book. Yeah, it's not the book that has no name. After Coach Valvano left, what was y'all's relationship like with him? And was it easy to keep in touch with him, or was he so busy? I was always curious about that, how he kept up with former players once he wasn't at the university anymore.
I'd come down and, I went to a couple of your games. I think I went to the North Carolina game at North Carolina. We talk about old times. Hey, E, what's going on and what's happening? I mean, but he was busy. Next thing you know, I found out he was sick. I left here in 87.
Yeah, so it wasn't a whole lot of time, I guess, really, that passed in between.
Yeah. It's not like, you see guys and the coach has been around for 10, 15 years, after you played, and I wish it was that. He never forgot his players, man. He never forgot his players.
After you left, I mean, it was only a couple of years, really, before he got sick.
More than that. Yeah, he went into broadcasting. We had a real unique relationship as player-coach, being a point guard. We would do a lot of talking prior to the game. When the game was there, he kind of let me, do what I wanted to, and let a lot of players do that. But I ended up having a different relationship once he was let go. We actually became friends. I would play golf with him. I'd go over his house. During the season, my senior year, I'd go over his house, talk, always so supportive. Was never negative about Coach Robinson or the program. He was always a positive influence because he knew that would only benefit me. That year I was drafted in the second round by the Orlando Magic, and I talked to him about it. I talked to him about the whole process. And I went down to training camp, and they had 3 point guards. They had Scott Skiles, Sam Vincent, and Moreland Wiley. They all had guaranteed contracts. I didn't play well, but regardless, I wouldn't have made the team. And I got cut. And I remember Coach V was the first person to call me and said, you keep working. You got a good attitude. You've never been told no in your life. You just keep at it. And if you ever make it to the NBA, you call me. I'm going to be at your first game. Yeah. So I went down and I went to the Raleigh Bullfrogs, local team here, and played. One day we were getting ready to play the Fayetteville Flyers. And ironically, Chuck Nevitt was on that team, Lorenzo Charles, Quinn Snyder, or Ranzino Smith. It was really a neat, tight-knit little local group. But I got a call up from Orlando that Skiles and Sam Vincent got injured on the same day. Even before I called my mom or my dad, I called Coach V. And I said, Coach, I'm flying out to Denver. Orlando called me up and he said, well, listen, I told you I was going to be at your first game. I can't make it to your first game, but I will come to a game soon. So he ended up coming to the first game in Orlando. We had a 7-game road trip and didn't even tell me he was going. And after the game, came back in the locker room, and that was the kind of thing that, he'd have to do that. He went out of his way to make it to a game, and I'll never forget that.
You guys talked about how Jimmy V, nobody's come since him, and one way he lives on is the V Foundation. Ernie, you were talking about earlier that you're involved in, and I didn't know if you guys wanted to talk just a few minutes about your involvement with the V Foundation and what your impressions are of V's legacy after the sports and everything were over, what he's done, and how he continues to live on.
Coach V is bigger now than he ever was. Winning the championship in '83 was big, but it really just jump-started the rest of his career. Even now that he's passed away, the legacy that he's leaving, I often think of, Coach V in heaven just smiling and just saying, man, they're playing my speech every year, and I'm bigger than life. And he wanted to make a difference, so what he has done, the legacy that he's left behind for his kids and his family is tremendous. But it's not surprising. It's the kind of thing that he was so special. The 2 biggest role models in my life were my father and Coach Valvano, and both of them died of cancer. And both of them, when they died, you never thought they were going to die. Yeah. Up until the end, you always thought that they were so strong in your mind that you never thought cancer's not going to beat those two. So what he has really done and the amount of money that they've raised,
it's astronomical when you look at the figures and what they're able to get back, and
it's unbelievable. I mean, everything's fully funded, and the amount of money they're given, and hopefully one day they will find a cure for cancer. They're making great strides with certain types of cancer, but they have really with Coach V kind of spearheaded the fight for cancer. And I know he's happy, and his family must be so proud of what he did as well. And Ernie and I as players are so proud, and I know all the NC State fans and the whole NC State family is just so proud that this is our guy that has done that. So it's a wonderful legacy he's left for not only his family, his players, but the whole Wolfpack community.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time to sit down and talk to us. Maybe we'll get to do it again sometime.
Would love it. Awesome. Appreciate you asking me. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.